Hey there, Paula Norcott here. I'm a lactation consultant in Maine. I worked in a hospital for almost 7 years, and I'm in private practice, and I do breastfeeding education through the state with the perinatal outreach program. So we decided to make some different videos for new bedside nurses in order to help them have tools to best support breastfeeding families. I want to talk today about whether or not we can actually support breastfeeding without being pushy. I think after speaking with so many nurses that this is a real concern of theirs. I totally understand. I view myself as a very judgment-free lactation consultant. I don't believe my job is to force people to breastfeed. It's just to support the ones who need your help fiercely and to let everybody make the best decision based on evidence-based information and their current situation so that they can go ahead and do what's best for them. So let's talk a little bit about language because I think this is so important. Your language. So what I can tell you after running support groups for postpartum people for the last 27 years is that the words that are said in a labor and delivery unit to a brand new parent or someone who's about to have a baby sticks with them forever. They remember everything. They especially remember the very best things that people said and the hardest things that they heard in their stay at the hospital. So let's talk about that language and how you can make sure you're supporting families without being pushy. So I know that this is a concern for a lot of people. They don't want to offend anyone or make anybody feel judged. And I think sometimes what ends up happening is rather than presenting all the information, they just say, okay. So here's an example of something that I have run into. We have a family in hospital whose baby has low blood sugar. And after trying multiple things, we've decided this baby needs to be supplemented. And we're in a hospital that doesn't have donor milk. So family's going to supplement with formula. And then I say to the family, when you're supplementing, it's best practice to pump. And then a family says, oh, I'm so exhausted. I just want to sleep through the night and give the baby formula. And I will respond to them. Now, this is where it gets tricky, right? Because your instinct is to say, no problem, but they very well may not know the consequences of that, and then it could impact their supply long term. So what I might say is something like, I totally understand. You're exhausted. You've been through a lot. Let me just explain to you what not removing milk for a long stretch of time might do. And then you can decide if that's important to you and how you want to proceed. And then I'll go on to explain to them how, pumping, how removing milk consistently every few hours tells the body to increase volume, and how not removing milk consistently every few hours tells the body not to produce more milk. So, and then I'll help them work out a schedule that makes the most sense. So very often they have not even had 2.5 hours in a row. So one of the things I'll do is if I'm trying to get 8 pumps in 24 hours, let's say this baby's not latching, we need to pump 8 times, is I'll bump their daytime pumps to about 2 hours and 45 minutes apart, and then give them a 4-hour stretch for the first stretch of the night, and then 3 hours after that, have them test that for 24 hours and see what they think. Very often that's all it takes. I also help them understand systems to make it as efficient as possible, having the pump parts all set up before you go to bed, having a plan that when the baby wakes up, the partner or a support person will feed that baby, and just maximizing the sleep in the nighttime. I very often, some people are triple feeding, and I will very often say to families, if you're exhausted, you could consider just pumping in the nighttime and putting baby to breast during the day. Your body right now needs the stimulation and you need rest. And just reassess that plan every 24 hours. True informed consent requires the family to have all of the information. So if you have a family who, let's say they're laboring and you're asking them about feeding. So what we don't want to do is assume. My favorite way to ask a family about feeding is like, what are your plans for feeding this baby? And very often, I would say more often than not, you have someone who's very solid in what their decision is. And if they're very solidly telling you, we're definitely going to formula feed this baby, I have zero intention to breastfeed. Cool. You might say, okay, makes total sense to me. That's your choice. It's your baby. If you have any questions about anything, including breastfeeding, you just give me a shout and I'll come and give you the information you need. You might have some people who feel unsure. And I've definitely run into this a few times in the hospital of somebody who's like, I don't know, I'm going to try breastfeeding, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to work out. And very often what they're doing is trying to protect their heart. They've had somebody near them who hasn't had a great experience. So the first thing I will say to them is, okay, in a situation like this, I'll say, okay, tell me if the world was filled with rainbows and unicorns, what feeding this baby would look like to you. And so then I let them go on to imagine a perfect world where everything goes well. And we know that that isn't real, but it gives me an idea of where their heart is. If they're saying like, oh, in a perfect world, I would just breastfeed the baby and I wouldn't have to pump and I wouldn't have to formula feed, that tells me that they really want to do this. And so I'm going to say, great, well, let's take this all one feeding at a time. There isn't a right answer. Every single drop of breast milk that goes into this baby counts, and you can make decisions based on each independent feed. And then I explain to them the demand and supply system and how that works. If you want a full supply, what's important is that you remove milk efficiently and effectively 8-ish times every 24 hours without skipping any long stretches of time. So for most people, that's about every 2 to 3 hours, or you can put yourself on an every 3-hour schedule. And you can tweak that schedule a little bit, but you don't really want to go more than 1 4-hour stretch with removing milk in the first 10 days. And very often people are like, okay, you've totally simplified it for me. That sounds great. You don't have to be pushy to give information. Remember how vulnerable these families are at this point in time. This is likely the hardest thing they've ever done and the most pivotal life experience that most people have ever had. And you are there as guides, not as decision makers, not to assume what they want, what they can handle, what they can't handle, but to just guide them with evidence-based information and then support their choices. Talk about combo feeding. So we have lots of families who come in and they say they're going to combo feed. And I get it. And I would say the vast majority of parents end up doing this at some point. What they, again, need to be aware of is the consequences of not removing milk. So I'll say to them, okay, I'm going to explain to you how demand and supply works for milk supply and how important the first 10 days are. And then if that's not a priority for you, you get to do this however you want to do it. So again, I explain demand and supply, how it works, what going a long stretch of time without removing milk will do, and how to navigate combo feeding while either trying to build a full supply or not worrying about a full supply. But I want to make sure they know everything, including if they start going 8 hours overnight without removing milk, there's a decent chance that they won't, that they'll make 50% or less of what the baby needs. There always is the chance that they could make plenty, but it's not that common. And so I want to make sure they know. The last thing you want to hear is nobody told me that I wasn't going to make enough milk if I didn't pump overnight. Okay, so now tools. So open-ended questions are without a doubt your best tool for navigating all of this, and especially in short periods of time. How are you feeling about how feeding's going? Simple. Like, what types of questions do you have? Are you having any discomfort? Are you having, okay, what does that feel like? Tell me more about that. Just ask them to explain it to you. And do you know that one of the single most valuable things that you can do for these families is to tell them that they're doing good by their baby? And I don't just mean the breastfeeding families. I mean all the families. You're doing such a great job with this baby. Look at the way this baby looks at you. You look like such a natural parent. Those little bits of confidence boosting that professionals can do can mean the world to families and be the difference between I'm going to continue to try versus I'm done. Here are some quotes that I have heard families repeat to me that they have heard from hospital staff. Your baby's really hungry. Your baby's starving. Your baby's not satisfied with your milk. You might have low calorie breast milk. These are all not, first of all, not evidence-based. And secondly, there's so many other ways to say that. Let's say you weigh a baby and the baby's losing a lot more weight than they should. You have to be very careful about your words because it feels so personal to a feeding parent to hear that their baby's not gaining weight appropriately. And you also have to explain to them what a normal percentage of weight loss is and what the plan is and why that's the plan. Very often what these families need is a little bridge to get them to where they want to be. So something like, it looks like your baby's lost 10%. It's been not quite 2 days. That's on the higher end of what we expect in the first 48 hours. So what we would like to do is just keep a close eye on you to make sure your baby's getting enough to eat. What we're going to try right now is a feed, and you like weighted feeds probably won't work before milk's in, but you can watch for sucks and swallows, explain to them what you see how long the baby is vigorous for. You can also have them pump if you want to see what type of volume they're getting, but you have to assess every single feeding independently because babies are not robots and sometimes they eat a little and sometimes they eat a lot. It's really not about needing to supplement a baby for most families. Most families are really open to whatever is the best choice for their baby. It's about how it's presented, especially when we're talking about formula. It feels personal. They often take it as a failure. A lot of people look at formula as I'm either formula feeding or I'm breastfeeding. They forget that there's like a range of normal in there. So, referring to formula as a bridge, making sure that the volumes are great, which we'll get into in a later video, and just making sure that you're there for them to support them. Okay. So wrapping up, remember, we want to avoid scare tactics. We want to be clear and concise with our information while also supporting how they feel about all of it because that matters. Parents don't always remember the words. They do remember how you made them feel. A calm, judgment-free approach will build confidence. It's not your job to convince anyone to breastfeed. It's just to offer compassionate, evidence-based support. It's not your responsibility to make decisions for families. It's really up to them. And it's okay to call in lactation or another nurse that might be helpful in these conversations if you need them.